public is difficult because it is an attachment behavior. And so it's by implication an intimate behavior that we do around close loved ones, particularly in our culture. So there's been a lot of discussion and concern about, women are crying at work and that's making people uncomfortable, or politicians cry, oh my goodness. It does create a lot of social discomfort. The interesting thing from an attachment standpoint is it never is ignored. I mean, you see that tears retain their power no matter what our cultural judgments are.
Hello, and welcome to Not Born Yesterday, a podcast dedicated to older adults and the challenges and joys of aging. I'm Miriam Goodman. Not Born Yesterday examines the problems and solutions of growing older today. We bring you the wisdom and voices of experts in the field of aging and offer tips on how to feel your best, use your lifetime skills and experience, and make the coming months and years as fulfilling as possible.
I'm Lynn Winter-Gross. Not Born Yesterday is brought to you by Next Village SF, a local nonprofit providing older adults with support to help age in place.
Today on Not Born Yesterday, we're talking about emotions and the meaning behind tears. We may think of crying as a sign of sadness, but tears can reflect joy as well as grief. Whether you're an adult who cries or just want to understand why crying is important, stay tuned for an examination of this fundamental human behavior.
Our guest today is Judith Kay Nelson, author of Seeing Through Tears, Crying and Attachment. Dr. Nelson is a psychotherapist and Dean Emerita of the Sanville Institute for Clinical Social Work and Psychotherapy. She believes crying is a way we establish and maintain emotional attachment. Although she writes about all stages of crying, today we want to talk about the psychological and emotional effects of crying in adults. Dr. Nelson, welcome to Not Born Yesterday.
Thank you so much. I appreciate being here.
So let's start out with what made you interested in the subject of tears and crying? You mentioned in your book that you first thought it was a cultural aversion that had kept serious scholars from studying crying, but it fascinated you.
Yes, I had, when I first began work as a therapist, I was in an outpatient psychiatric clinic in a university hospital, and I observed a person who with an unusual pattern of crying, and it puzzled me. So I went to the wonderful library we had and the card catalog file at that stage of my life, and there was zero references about crying. And I was so puzzled. So I went and looked up laughter. There were drawers full of studies of laughter. So I just was puzzled and I filed that away. And so when I was ready to do my dissertation, one looks for a gap in the literature, and I was well aware of this one, and it seemed interesting and deep to me. So that's when I pursued it.
Well, first of all, you talk about it's an attachment issue. I think it would be nice if you would explain what attachment is for our listeners.
Attachment behavior that we all is inborn in all infants around the world. Every infant in every culture cries. And the reason for that is because human infants need a caregiver in order to survive. And unlike some of our primate relatives who can hold on or cling or follow, we are completely physically dependent as young infants, as newborn infants. So the cry, in both senses of the word, calling out and shedding tears. We don't shed tears in the very beginning of life, but after a month and a half or 2 months, we do. But what we do is call for our caregiver. So it's designed to undo separation and bring people together, a needy child with attachment needs and a caregiver who's able to provide that care. So as that behavior continues throughout life, it continues to represent and signify some kind of separation that we are feeling a loss of or a need to undo in some way. So the universal points of crying are in infancy, at separation from the caregiver, and at the death of a close loved one. There are societies in the world where it is forbidden, where it's considered dangerous to the soul of the departed, but it is always present and always understood and always part of the grief process.
So, what happens in the brain and the body when we cry?
Well, what's happening is there's the crying is a signal of negative arousal, we call it. And so something is amiss. It can be separation, or it could be pain, it could be hunger, it could be a lot of things. But the brain is signaling that need for someone to come. So what happens is over time, that pattern gets established, and the pathways are set in our brain to be as to whether or not we can confidently expect someone to care for us, or whether they will be erratically available, or whether they will be expecting us to take care of ourselves. In our culture, we do a lot of early independence training with infant seats and car seats, and not carrying our infants a lot. So that by the time we're into adulthood, we have what we call internal working models of attachment. So that when I cry, for example, if I'm alone, maybe I'm able to self-regulate because I've had good caregiving along the lines of reliability, and so that I can expect that. And that's built into me and my brain and my nervous system.
So you talked about crying when we're babies and to get attention. So how does the meaning of crying change as we get older?
Well, it changes only in the complexity, from those early needs for the presence of a caregiver. But it's always, at least 95% of the time, about separation. So if it's separation from the caregiver in infancy, by the time a child is told they can't have a cookie, they're separated from the cookie, it begins to have the same grief reaction. They're crying, they're upset, they want the care to come back. So we begin to understand, to use crying in a variety of ways, but always to deal with some kind of loss, or at least the majority of time.
Are there gender differences in crying as we age?
Yes, boys and girls cry at the same rate, surprisingly, even though the socialization starts very early until puberty. So we begin to see the influence of the endocrine system and the hormones at puberty. And at that point, girls begin to cry about four or five times as often as boys. And so that there are definitely gender differences. There are also social prescriptions, as we know. But oddly enough, some recent studies have been showing that men feel more positive about their crying than women do, because of course women get a lot of negative feedback about don't be a baby, or don't cause trouble for other people, or it's up to you to take care of everybody else, so be strong. So there are a lot of conflicting messages, but in terms of the physiology over the broad population, women do cry more frequently than men.
Do you think we've done a disservice to men, to boys and men, by emphasizing the fact that they should just grow up and stop crying?
Well, I think to both genders. I think we have cultural judgments that have impaired us in terms of our comfort with. Now, remember, we maybe should back up a tiny bit and say we're not talking about crying as getting rid of something. I think that's the biggest misconception. We're talking about crying, instead of discharging, recharging. How do we bring in something that's comforting, that's a kind of caregiving, either literally from other people? Touch is a very strong way. We're very often drawn when someone's crying in despair to reach out and touch, or to express some kind of empathy, sympathy. And so we have definitely that sense of judgment that comes, and it's doing us a disservice, because we need each other, we need connection, we need comfort. Particularly with aging, there's so much loss, and we can all, in this age group, speak to that as we lose friends, as we lose mobility, as we lose our acute memory, as we lose the ability to, as our jobs, our careers, our ability to travel. I mean, just the list goes on. So there's definitely a tremendous amount of loss. And while we don't weep for all those things, on occasion, it might be that would be helpful to us, or to share that sense of loss with other people, and perhaps to be comforted, or to just share in being together and having that sense of connection.
I have to tell you, yesterday I saw on the internet a talk show host. A guest on the show was saying how he gets emotional at the end of watching a marathon. He thinks it's so fabulous that these people have gone through this and they have, completed the marathon. That makes him emotional and he cries. And the host says, "Oh, you just need a shot of testosterone." And I thought, how rude is that?
Oh,
Yeah.
if attachment and separation are a circle, that crying is coming back around to connection. You're feeling that sense of surge of joy, elation, accomplishment as a group. It's a powerful feeling, and what a wonderful way to do that, through shedding tears of connection. So that's not about separation, but about connection. So that's when those tears of awe, or at the end of some fabulous film you've seen, or artistic experience you've shared or had. That's what that's about.
I was thinking of people crying when they're getting their Academy Awards. They're up there, I can't, can barely speak, and they're crying.
Yes, well, I think that's a combination of, that's what we call crying at the happy ending, because they're all the Academy Awards they didn't win, all the acting classes they had and felt like they were failures, all the parts they didn't get. I mean, it all comes together in that moment of, finally, I've done it. So crying at the happy ending is very often a delayed expression of grief that's also probably mixed with some joy, but it's very much in the grief column if we look at it over time.
So, can you discuss the cultural attitudes towards crying and how these may change as people get older?
Yes, I think, we're all well aware of the cultural judgments, just like the one you mentioned, and with the man at after the marathon. And over time, it seems as though there's a little bit more acceptance of vulnerability with aging, cultural acceptance of vulnerability. Now, that doesn't always accompany what's happening internally. The person may still be self-judgmental, carrying those cultural messages within them. But the crying frequency, there's not a lot of data, but appears to be a little bit easier. Crying appears to be a little bit easier and more frequent for men as we and they age. Whereas for some women, their crying patterns change. Some women cry less, some women cry the same, some women cry more. So I think that's a combination of internal neediness, change, vulnerability, and the cultural messages that are beginning to shift a bit as we age. In particular, I think with the farther we are into the later 80s and 90s, I think there's much more appreciation for the vulnerability.
But do you see some cultures accepting it more than others, or some cultures limiting more than others?
Oh, yes. I mean, there are cultures that totally embrace weeping. The one example from New Guinea, unfortunately, this has been impacted by, as our culture has, by industrialization and Christianization. But the cultures that they teach children how to weep, men weep when there's a loss or a move or a celebration. The women weep while speaking evocative poetry. There's a huge range of almost worshipful feelings towards tears. And other cultures are tolerant. Others prescribe weeping rituals where they have assigned or professional weepers who are mourners who come to the funerals and are paid to do the weeping for everybody. So there's a wide range, but in general, I think we could look at a continuum all the way from the Kalulis in New Guinea to perhaps the Western European, American culture that we see here with us, where we're extremely ambivalent, to put it mildly.
You talk about all the older adults and the issues that we face as we age. Do you think crying can be cathartic for us as we deal with all these issues?
Well, I have a little trouble with the word catharsis because it implies getting something out. I'm thinking more that it can be healing and comforting because of our ability to provide self-care, self-nurturing, or under certain circumstances to maybe share those losses with other people. And I think that what we call interactive regulation, that's where I think we get the most comfort. I don't think getting it out is quite the right word. The catharsis, pursuing that leaves us in a dead end, whereas pursuing the connection aspect of crying gives us a lot more hopeful and comforting options.
So what you're saying is there are mental health benefits to allowing yourself to cry.
Very definitely, yes. And if you're not too conflicted about it, now we have to look at the aspect of symptomatic crying, where people cry and hate it, cry and desperately want to stop, cry and get mad at themselves. I mean, there's just a whole lot of internal struggle. Where there is definitely crying going on, but it's not comforting. So to that extent, it depends on the circumstance.
So, what's a family member or caregiver to do when they see that the person they're taking care of is crying a lot? Should they be worried or just listen and think they'll stop at some point?
Well, it depends. I mean, I think if, they're a caregiver of someone with physical problems and vulnerability, but who's still mentally present, it's one set of circumstances. If the person with dementia, a lot of people with dementia cry a lot, cry out, exhibit a lot of distress that's hard to pin down. But in general, you want to try and do the same thing. Touch is the number one comfort, and we're very inhibited about that in our culture. And unfortunately, when I was working as a psychotherapist, teaching students, I used to say we work with both hands tied behind our back because we're forbidden from touch because of the potential misreading of that by various people and legally as well. So we are losing that primary comfort, which is right back to our infancy, when a hand on your shoulder or a stroking or holding your hand, anything can be so soothing and comforting.
Says you're not alone. I'm here for you.
I'm here for you. So, except that, or otherwise we have other methods like we use with babies. We sing, we put on music, we distract them, all those other kinds of things that can help ease someone through a difficult period too.
So, how is the best way to support older adults in expressing their emotion in healthy ways, including crying?
Well, I think the best way is to ask questions, to be available, to be open, to be non-judgmental, to listen, to care, to spend time, be present. I mean, all of those things that we know that help us to connect. And I think those are the gifts of our personhood and our presence, whether it's by Zoom, phone, email, or in person, to be able to be present with someone and truly curious and truly interested and truly available, I think is the biggest gift that we can give each other as we age.
And I think we have to remember that tears don't always mean something's wrong. They can mean that we're human, that we're healing, or even maybe we're just remembering something. So is there still a stigma for crying in public like this?
Well, crying in public is difficult because it is an attachment behavior. And so it's by implication an intimate behavior that we do around close loved ones, particularly in our culture. So there's been a lot of discussion and concern about, women are crying at work and that's making people uncomfortable, or politicians cry, oh my goodness, and so it does create a lot of social discomfort. The interesting thing from an attachment standpoint is it never is ignored. I mean, you see that tears retain their power no matter what our cultural judgments are. So that when somebody cries, if they're in the back of a bus crying, I mean, everybody's, or, and I mean silent crying. I mean, or somebody sitting on the steps of the post office crying. It's very hard to restrain yourself from, should I do something? What's appropriate here? I don't want to intrude. I hate to leave them alone. I mean, it stirs us up. Crying is designed to upset other people so that they respond. It's part of the caregiving system is designed to react that way to crying. So it is disturbing. So doing it in public, I mean, you can't always control it, obviously, but I think it is much more conflicted.
Well, thank you so much for sharing all this valuable information with us. I think people have new insights into crying, whether it's for themselves or with someone they live with. So thank you so much, Dr. Judith Nelson.
Well, thank you very much. And thank you for your insightful and meaningful questions.
Today on News You Can Use, we want to talk about an easy way to stay healthy. Get outside. A new study by WebMD highlights the many advantages of getting out of the house and walking outdoors. You don't need a gym or special equipment, but if you crave it, many local parks have inclines or pull-up bars and other equipment you can use.
The research shows multiple reasons for exercising outside. First, our bodies need sunlight to help us absorb certain minerals like calcium and vitamin D. This vitamin is important for your bones, blood cells, and immune system. It also helps your body absorb calcium and phosphorus. In the summer, spending time in the sun for just 5 to 15 minutes, 2 or 3 times a week is fine. In the winter, we should stay out a little longer.
Being out in the sun lessens anxiety. Sunlight can keep our moods calm, positive, and focused by raising the levels of the hormone serotonin. And studies show that the distraction of being in nature can improve our focus and creativity. Exercising outside can also give us a chance to be social, an important contributor to our mental health. Make plans to walk with friends regularly if you can.
Another advantage of getting outside, the sun influences our sleep cycle and our internal clock by affecting the cells in our eyes. To get the maximum effect, try walking in the early morning sun. Being in nature helps us relax and can help us concentrate and focus more effectively. Nature can provide a mental break, boost creativity, and problem-solving abilities. Regular access to green spaces has been linked to lower risks of depression.
And finally, like other forms of exercise, walking outdoors help us burn calories and keep a healthy weight. As with all exercise, though, be prepared. Wear long sleeves, a hat, and sunglasses. Apply sunscreen and try to let someone know where you're going, especially if you're planning to hike on a path with few others around. Take a jacket and your cell phone in case you need to call someone. And most important, leave your troubles behind. And that's our podcast for today. Our thanks to our guest, Dr. Judith Nelson, author of Seeing Through Tears, Crying and Attachment. You can learn more about Next Village San Francisco at their website, nextvillagesf.org, or by calling 415-888-2868. Our theme music is from Hook Sounds, and Jason Dahlstedt is our engineer. And we thank you for listening. We'd love to hear what you would like us to discover and discuss. Please contact us at notbornyesterdaypodcast.org. Follow us on Facebook and Instagram, and subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts. All of these are free and help us to know our audience better. Be well, stay strong, and remember, you weren't born yesterday. I'm Lynn Winter Gross.
And I'm Miriam Goodman.